Welcome back, everybody. My name is Tucker, and in today's video, I'm looking back at some 2014 NBA draft grades over here on Bleacher Report. I've done this with a couple of other classes, and this was one that I was definitely excited about getting to because it's really interesting in terms of where the top picks are now and the fact that there's only 2 players in this entire class that have made All-NBA teams to this point in their career, which is unusual for a draft class that is now 6 years into their career. So we're going to go ahead and get into this, beginning, of course, with number 1 overall, the Cleveland Cavaliers, Andrew Wiggins, getting a grade of an A. And obviously, he didn't end up playing for the Cavs. He was traded for Kevin Love. But at the time, people were very excited about both Andrew Wiggins and Jabari Parker, the 2 top picks in this class, because they were both supposed to be really outstanding scorers, and what was going to separate Andrew Wiggins was his athleticism as well as his ability to defend. And early on in his career, he could still score. That's calmed down lately as he's gotten better teammates, and defensively, it just never translated for him to the NBA. And even though this isn't like the best draft class that we're going to see as we look through a couple of these other classes, the amount of talent that they could have had with this first pick compared to what they actually got, the Timberwolves in this case, and Andrew Wiggins, is certainly disappointing. I mean, I think this has to be like a C or a C minus pick given, his level of production to this point in the league, and also the fact, obviously, he's not even on the team anymore. Never a good sign for a number 1 overall pick. Moving on now to number 2 overall, the Milwaukee Bucks selecting Jabari Parker out of Duke, also getting an A. And this one, I'll give them a little bit of a break here because Jabari Parker initially looked like he was going to be a fantastic NBA player when he was healthy. But he had a couple of injuries early on in his career, and I really think that more than anything is what derailed him, because he could score the ball, he could shoot it. He had a whole bunch of different offensive moves that he could use to be able to get to the rim and score in the mid-range of the post. Really versatile scorer, and I think that the athleticism that he had kind of got taken away by some of those early injuries, as well as just the rhythm and kind of being a bigger part of the Bucks' plans. And then once Giannis became, who he was, it became clear that Jabari Parker was not going to be on that team for much longer, which is unfortunate. I'm going to give them like a B minus to a C, but it's more about the injuries than anything else, in my opinion, for Jabari Parker. If he had stayed healthy, he would have had a much better run there in Milwaukee. Moving on now to arguably the best player in the entire class it's either him or Nikola Jokic, we'll talk about later, as the other All-NBA guy. The Philadelphia 76ers selecting Joel Embiid at number 3 overall, which gets an A- grade here, and I don't see how it can be anything other than an A+. Yes, there's injury issues. There's other things to consider with Joel Embiid, and the fact that he didn't even play for the first 2 years in Philly has to be considered here. But when he's healthy and when he's right, he is one of the most dominant players in the entire league. When he's healthy, when he's right, can easily be a top 10 player in terms of impact on the floor. I don't think that's an overstatement for how impactful he can be on both ends of the floor. It just depends on health and conditioning for him, and this has to be an A+ in hindsight, in my opinion. Moving on now to number 4 overall, the Orlando Magic selecting Aaron Gordon out of Arizona. They gave this a B+. I think that's relatively fair. Maybe you go with a B here instead. I think Aaron Gordon is a solid player. He's never going to be anything great, more than likely never going to be an all-star. Still has room to improve offensively, especially as a shooter, but situationally hasn't been in a great situation in Orlando in terms of the spacing required in a modern NBA offense in general, but more specifically for his position and him needing to play the 4 more often. He's been moved up to the 3 way more than he ever should have been. And I honestly would like to see him in a different scenario before I really judge exactly, how good or bad of an NBA player he is. But I do like his athleticism, his versatility, and does have a good amount of offense to provide as well. I think somewhere around a B, maybe you could go B+, depending on how much blame you want to put on the Magic for a, somewhat disappointing career to this point for a number 4 overall pick. But I think this grade is mostly fair. Moving on now to number 5 overall, the worst grade to this point is the Utah Jazz selecting Dante Exum, number 5 overall, getting a B. I think that this is more like a C to a C- to maybe even a D, because Dante Exum really never contributed to the Jazz in the time that he was there, either because of injury or because he wasn't good enough to see the floor. Now they traded him for Jordan Clarkson to the Cleveland Cavaliers. And the idea here was that this guy was supposed to be a versatile player, could play the 1 or the 2, really long, athletic, really good defender, and then was going to grow into his offensive game, and that just never happened. And like I said, even when he was healthy, really didn't contribute that much to this team. So I think a C- to a D is probably a more accurate grade here now in 2020 for Dante Exum at number 5 overall. Moving on now to the Boston Celtics selecting Marcus Smart out of Oklahoma State, getting a grade of an A. And I remember, if I'm getting this correctly, Marcus Smart came out as a sophomore. Had he come out as a freshman, there was he would have been considered one of the favorites to go number 1 overall. I believe he stayed an extra year, but regardless, a very highly sought after prospect coming out of college as this really physical defender that could get to the rim and play make for others. And he's been a really nice piece for Boston. And whether you want to argue that he should be better as a number 6 overall pick and should be an all-star caliber player or not, for what he is in the NBA, he does a lot of things right. Defensively, the hustle, the versatility, the energy, the effort, and still continuing to grow as a shooter. A really, really integral and important piece of that Celtics team. And I think an A is certainly a valid grade here. Moving on now to number 7 overall, the Los Angeles Lakers selecting Julius Randle out of Kentucky, getting an A-. Obviously, Randle did not finish out his rookie deal with the Lakers, ended up with the Pelicans and now with the Knicks. Overall, though, as a player, I think you can go probably B+ to an A for this pick, or B+ to an A-, excuse me. I think this is probably about correct. Julius Randle is a player that's going to put up numbers when he gets consistent minutes. Whether or not your team is better with him on the floor or not is still, remains to be seen, because he doesn't provide a ton spacing-wise at the 4, so sometimes you do have to size down and play him at the 5, and then defensively there are certainly some question marks there as well. Next up now, another bad grade here, number 8 overall, the Sacramento Kings selecting Nik Stauskas, getting a C. And I don't really see how this can be anything better than like a D or a D+ or something, because Nik Stauskas, again, another guy that just did not contribute for his original team and has struggled to find a consistent role across the NBA. Never something you want to see out of a number 8 overall pick. Moving on now to the Charlotte Hornets at number 9. Noah Vonleh out of Indiana getting an A+ grade from Bleacher Report. This is not something that I expected to see, because I don't remember there being a ton of Noah Vonleh hype at the time. He's supposed to be this versatile front court player, could shoot, could defend, good athlete, things like that. But I don't remember, it being huge value for them to get him at number 9 overall. And if I'm remembering correctly, Noah Vonleh lasted like a year and a half, maybe a year in Charlotte before being traded to, I want to say, Portland. And so for that to be the case and for this to be an A+ graded pick is kind of crazy. This has to be more like a C- to a D. I'm not remembering the compensation they got in that trade for Noah Vonleh. But regardless, in terms of his impact on the Hornets, I think, a C- to a D is a much more accurate grade. Certainly not an A+ pick. Moving on now to number 10 overall, Alfred Payton, going to the Orlando Magic with a B- grade. And if I'm remembering this correctly, this was originally the Sixers pick, and they moved back from this pick, and then they got Dario Sarch, who we'll talk about a little bit later on. Alfred Payton, a good player, solid player, has held on throughout the league, but never anything crazy impactful there in Orlando. His lack of shooting ability continued to hold him back. Someone that can play make and can defend, though, it's just in the modern NBA, if you're going to be a guy with a ball in your hand and you don't have that ability to shoot from the outside, it's going to be a really tough fit. So a B- to C grade is probably pretty accurate here for Alfred Payton. Moving on now to number 11, the Chicago Bulls getting Doug McDermott with a B grade. I feel like this was I feel like there was a trade involved here as well. There was a lot of trades in the middle of the first round in this class. Doug McDermott has found a nice role in the NBA, but it wasn't with Chicago, and is now with Indiana. Spent some time with Oklahoma City as well. Solid shooter, number 11 overall. Someone that isn't going to be able to provide much else other than that, but in college was a really good scorer in addition to a shooter. And once he got to the NBA, just athletically, he wasn't able to keep up to be able to attack the rim and score in the post and things like that. So he's been relegated to just being a spot-up shooter. He's a solid player. I think a B is a fair grade. Moving on now to number 12 overall, the Philadelphia 76ers getting Dario Sarch with an A- grade. And I think that is probably a little bit of an overgrade, but if you were grading this 2 years ago, I think an A- certainly would have been accurate. But ever since Dario Sarch left Philadelphia, he has struggled to find a consistent role on the Timberwolves or with the Suns. I still think he's a talented player as a front court playmaker, and I'm hoping that he catches on with another team. But it just, for some reason, he hasn't been able to find a groove. I think a B to a B, I don't want to say B+. I think a B is probably about fair at this point for Dario Sarch, given his contributions to Philly, but then also his struggles to do that with different teams afterwards. Now Zach Lavine, number 13 overall, a B grade for the Minnesota Timberwolves. In terms of value at number 13 overall, I think this definitely has to be more like a B+ to an A. I don't love Zach Lavine's position or situation with Chicago, as I talked about in my most recent video, but as it relates specifically to value in the draft compared to the amount of talent you're getting out of the pick, I think that this is definitely an A grade here at number 13 overall for Minnesota, and then obviously later for Chicago. I don't want to talk too much about all of these random like middle first round guys. A couple ones I do want to point out. TJ Warren is an A- at 14 overall. Good value now in Indiana. A guy that can shoot, could defend, can score. Nice value there. Jusuf Nurkic, a B+ to the Nuggets, ended up going to Portland because they got Nurkic as well as Nikola Jokic in this class. We'll talk about Jokic a little bit later. Getting a B+ there, I think that's fair. He's a solid player for Portland, and hopefully he comes back healthy because he's actually a pretty important piece for them. Number 19 overall, the Denver Nuggets getting Gary Harris, and also getting an A+ grade here from Bleacher Report. Through the first handful of years of his career, that would have been accurate, but lately Gary Harris has just not been able to score the ball. His offensive game has really dipped, and it's unfortunate because there's not really much of an explanation for it. And right now he's looking like someone that might be off their team here within the next year if he can't turn it around. But at the time, in terms of value for the number 19 overall pick through the first few years of his career, this definitely would have been good value. Other ones that are interesting here, number 24 overall, Shabazz Napier to the Heat, getting an A+. This is one where LeBron was like, man, I really like Shabazz Napier. They picked him, and then LeBron left. So that was kind of a crazy situation. Obviously never made much of a contribution to Miami. Is a okay scoring rotation point guard, but never anything special. Certainly not A+ value. Clint Capella at an A- and number 25 overall. I actually remember a lot of people trashing this pick at the time, saying it was way too early to be selecting someone as raw as Capella. So it's interesting that he gets an A- there. Now, as we move to the second round, some interesting players here. Spencer Dinwiddie, an A- with Detroit. Certainly really good value there. And then we get to number 41 overall, Nikola Jokic, a B- selection for the Denver Nuggets, and became one of 2 all-star selections in this class. I mean, there's no way that they really could have predicted that he would have become what he has, and to the point where they ended up moving on from Jusuf Nurkic, who was their first round pick, in favor of their second round pick, Nikola Jokic, because he is just that special of a player. Obviously, fantastic value and the best draft pick in this entire class in terms of value compared to the number 41 overall pick, getting an All-NBA caliber guy and a borderline MVP caliber player is ridiculous value in this class. We've got Jordan Clarkson here as well. A couple of other interesting players as we get now later into the second round. But overall, I would say this has been a pretty disappointing draft class to this point. Certainly some depth in there. Guys like Zach Lavine, Jeremy Grant is in there as well. You've got, who did I talk about earlier? Spencer Dinwiddie as well. But when you consider that, you know, if you take Nikola Jokic out of this and he never developed into what he has, only one All-NBA caliber player in this entire class, that being Joel Embiid, is I don't think you can call that anything other than a disappointment to this point for a class that is now 6 years into their respective careers. Now, a lot of these guys are still young. Maybe they'll be able to turn it around. Guys like Julius Randle, Aaron Gordon might still have a little bit more room to grow, and there's some really good contributors on good teams as well, guys like Marcus Smart. But in terms of star power, there's not a ton to speak of here. And then, as I said, a couple of guys that were picked early have flamed out already. Guys like Jabari Parker, Nik Stauskas, Dante Exum, and to a certain extent, Alfred Payton as well. You would like to see, in terms of depth, a little bit more from those guys in terms of contributions to their original teams or just to the NBA in general. But yeah, that's going to be the end of today's video, and I thank you all very much for watching. Once again, my name is Tucker. If you missed any of my previous videos, then be sure to check out the boxes on screen. Thanks again, and I'll see you all next time.